In this tutorial video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this beautiful, shimmery goldfish painting. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, let me go ahead and show you what materials you're going to need. First, you're going to need some watercolor paper. Cotton is the best, but it's okay if it's not. Now you can technically do this painting without this, but I highly recommend masking fluid. That's going to keep our goldfish from getting blue paint on them. We're going to need masking tape for the edges and to keep the paint from buckling. You're going to need 3 different kinds of blue watercolor. This will be important for the background. And then you're going to need 2 different reds, or a red and an orange, and a yellow for the goldfish. You're also going to need a black for the goldfish eyes. Now, if you don't have watercolor tubes, it is totally okay if you use one of these pan sets, as long as it has enough colors in it. A spray bottle will definitely come in handy with this tutorial, and some white gouache or even some white acrylic paint will be really useful for the bubbles and the extra details. Then you're going to want at least 3 different sized brushes, so I have a big, medium, and small here. And let's go ahead and get started with drawing the actual goldfish. So I'll be drawing with a black marker, but I highly recommend using pencil. I'm just using black marker so you guys can see the goldfish a little bit better on the camera. So let's go ahead and start with the goldfish eye. It's just a little circle, and then another circle inside of the circle. After that, we can go ahead and move on to the body. So I'm going to draw this slightly curved line, and I'm going to stop near the front. Then when I'm done with that, I'm going to draw the bottom part of the goldfish body, and then those 2 lines are going to connect. Then we can go ahead and draw his gills, and then he has a little fin right here on the side of his body. I'm adding lines to the fin for just a little bit of extra detail. Then we have this fin on the top of his head, so it curves up, then it goes down the wavy line. And I'm going to go ahead and add some extra lines on the inside for detail, just like the fin we did on the body. Then we have a fin down here on the bottom of his body. And then another one kind of goes behind the first fin we just drew. And then just like the other fins, we're going to go ahead and add some of those lines for detail. Another line for detail. One more fin on his body. Then we're going to go ahead and draw his tail. So goldfish have really big tails, really big, really long tails. So here's the first part of the tail, and then the second part. Then the last thing we need to do is just add those lines for detail again. Then we can draw the other part of the tail. And then some more lines for detail. All right, now that we're done with our first goldfish, we're gonna draw the other one. So just like before, we're gonna draw a circle for the eye and then another circle on the inside. It's gonna be pretty much the same as the other goldfish that we drew. We're gonna add the gill again. We're gonna draw that fin on the side of his body. We're gonna draw the top part of his body. Then we'll draw the bottom part. We'll go ahead and draw that top fin just like before, wiggly line on the way down. Then we'll add those slightly curved lines for detail on the fin. Then we'll go ahead and draw these bottom fins. We're gonna draw them a little bit differently than the other goldfish. The other goldfish, they kind of curved upwards, and these are just going straight down. We're gonna add those slightly slanted, slightly curved lines for detail on the fins. Then we'll go ahead and draw tail. So just like the other one we drew, curves and then comes back in. Then we just need to add that detail that we did last time. So we're gonna add those lines that meet up at the middle. There's one half. And then these are going to curve in the other direction. So these are going to curve and go back towards the middle. Just like that. Alrighty, now that we have our little fishies drawn, we need to go ahead and grab our masking tape. So we're going to pull off a piece that's long enough to cover one of the sides. So I'm gonna go ahead and tape, starting off with this side. I'm trying to make sure that not all of the tape is covering the paper. I want my painting to have a very thin border, and however much tape is covering the paper is how much of a border you're gonna have. So we're gonna go ahead and repeat the process on all four sides. So I'm gonna speed up the footage I have so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, awesome. Now that it's securely taped down, we're gonna go ahead and take our masking fluid. We're gonna shake it up because if we don't, it kind of sticks together and it's really, really hard to use. So go ahead and shake up your masking fluid. We really wanna make sure there aren't any clumps inside. And once we feel pretty good about how much we've shaken it up, we can go ahead and start on the masking fluid process. So I would take a brush that you don't care too much about, because sometimes masking fluid can be really hard to get out of a brush. So I would grab a really old brush and go ahead and dip it into your masking fluid. I would grab a pretty generous amount, and you're just gonna cover your goldfish. The reason that we're using the masking fluid for this is because when we do the background, which we're gonna do the background first, when we do that, there is a chance that if we don't use masking fluid, the paint is gonna flow into the goldfish and it would ruin the painting. Because when we use watercolor paint, we can't really paint over something. It's really hard. Watercolor is not exactly the most forgiving medium. So we're gonna protect our goldfish by covering them in this fluid so that the paint can't, get onto the goldfish. A big reason that the paint would be able to get onto the goldfish is because we're gonna be using the wet on wet technique a lot, which means that we're gonna be wetting the paper and then putting the different colors of watercolor on, and it's gonna flow, and it's really hard to control where it's going to go. So it's just safer to do this, I feel. So the whole thing is covered when it looks light yellow. You see how the masking fluid on the goldfish looks a different color than the paper? That's how you know the whole thing is covered. You want to be really careful with this and really take your time, because if you miss an area, well, the paint's gonna get on that area. So be really careful, take your time, go slowly, use a generous amount until your entire goldfish is covered. All right, before you move on to the next step, make sure that your liquid latex or your masking fluid has completely dried. Otherwise, bad things can happen. So if it's completely dried, meaning if you put your finger on it and it doesn't go anywhere, you can go ahead and move on to this step. So I'm taking the spray bottle, I'm spraying the entire paper to get it nice and wet for this technique we're about to use. And once you feel like the paper is damp enough, you can go ahead and start painting. So I'm gonna grab my medium-sized brush. I'm gonna dip it into my first blue. So I have a cerulean blue, a turquoise blue, and a darker blue. So I'm going in with that turquoise blue, and it's okay, it doesn't matter what shades of blue you use as long as you have multiple. I'm gonna start laying down that color. I'm leaving spaces in between for the other colors to blend in. You're gonna see, it's gonna be really cool when the colors blend together. When I'm done using the color, I'm gonna wash off my brush. I'm doing that off camera. And then I'm gonna take my towel and I'm gonna make sure the excess water is gone. Now I'm going in with that other color. And as you can see, it's starting to mix. See how that lighter blue is kind of going in and mixing with that turquoise? Isn't that so pretty? I think this is the most satisfying part of this painting. But you're just gonna go in with your 3 different colors and you're gonna blend them together. So I'll show you what that looks like. This is one of those processes in the painting where you just have to do what feels right to you. You use as much of one color as feels right. You blend however feels right. It's really just about feeling the watercolor, as cheesy as that might sound. One big thing to keep in mind though when you're doing this, try not to let any of the watercolor pool. What I mean by that is there are some parts of my painting where it looks a little bit darker. Do you see that? That means there's too much watercolor, there's excess watercolor in that area. And if it dries like that, it's gonna dry really weird. So see if you can dry off your paintbrush and pull that watercolor away from the area if it's too saturated, if it's too wet. That way your painting doesn't dry really weird and you're like, what happened? I don't want that to happen to your painting. So just keep that in mind when you're going all the way around. So this part is completely optional, but once your paint has dried, and if you want to make your painting extra shimmery, I would take one of these sparkly watercolors. See, I have this one. It's really, really shimmery. I'm just gonna go ahead and wet it with my spray bottle, wet it with my paintbrush, and I'm gonna cover the entire thing in this shimmery watercolor. It's very sheer. This brand in particular is very sheer, so I'm just gonna use it on top of the painting that we've already done, and I'm gonna use it all the way around the painting. Now, once everything is completely dry, you can go ahead and peel off your masking fluid. I just take my thumb and I gently press it until it rolls off. And once it's come off, you can see your goldfish that you drew underneath. So the first thing we're gonna do with our goldfish is we're gonna put a layer of water on top. This is just gonna ensure that when we're painting, all the colors are gonna very nicely blend into each other for a more natural look. So this part is really fun. We're gonna go ahead and go in with our darkest orange or red that we have, and we're gonna paint the very top of the body. See how the paint kind of spreads out and starts trickling down? That's the beauty of the wet on wet technique. It's hard to have complete control over the watercolor, but that's kind of what makes it fun. So we're gonna bring down that watercolor a little bit further. Make sure it's not pooling, because remember, it can dry really funny if we let it pool too much. See how some parts of it are darker than others? There's too much watercolor there, so make sure that if that happens to your painting, you go ahead and remove the excess with a dry brush or with a towel. I'm gonna go in really quick with a rag and just get rid of that excess. Then we're gonna go ahead and take our yellow color and we're gonna blend it into our orangey red. Blend it in. See how when we put them side by side, they kind of go into each other. Creates this really pretty effect. So we're gonna have those blend into one another. Then we're gonna wash off our brush. We're gonna make sure it's not too damp, and we're gonna pull that yellow color further down. We're gonna pull that color we created further down, because the tummy of the goldfish is not nearly as saturated as the top. So we're just gonna pull it down till we have this very subtle color down here. As you can see, our goldfish isn't all that saturated yet, so we're gonna go back in with our dark red, our darkest color, and we're just gonna dot the top of the body. I'm gonna go in with just a little bit more to make sure it's really saturated. As you can see, that red is really bright, really brilliant. And I'm gonna drag it down a little bit. Now, you can do that on the other side too, and once everything has dried, we're gonna go ahead and give the tail a really good spritz. And we're gonna color in the tail and all of the fins a light blue. You might be wondering, why would we do that? Aren't they orangey yellow? And yes, you're right, but I guess the outer membrane of the fin and the tail is very clear, very translucent. So in order to get that effect, we want to make sure that the fin and the tail, they aren't just bright white. That's not going to look realistic. So we're going to go ahead and go in with a light blue, and we're just going to lightly cover the area, all the fins and the tail. All right, when we're done with that, we can go ahead and move on to some of the more tiny details of our goldfish. So I'm gonna draw the gills right here. And we don't want it to just be a line, so I'm gonna go in with my brush once I've cleaned it, and I'm gonna pull that orange color closer to the eye. See how it kind of leaves like a lighter color as you move the brush? So we're blending that line in. We're blending that line in so that it doesn't look as cartoony, because we want it to look softer. We want it to look more realistic. So we're gonna blend that in. And then after we blend that in, we're gonna go ahead and take that same red color and we're gonna trace the fin on the side of the body. So the key to getting really straight lines with your paintbrush is to steady your hand and don't paint with your wrist, paint with your entire arm. So move your entire hand using your arm, using your elbow instead of your wrist. That's how you're gonna get really good control. All right, we are on to the most tedious part of this painting. We're gonna be making a bunch of little fish scales. So in order to make the fish scales, you're just gonna make a U shape and just make sure they're really close together. And we're gonna do this with our smallest paintbrush, and we're gonna do this with our darkest red, and try to make sure that they perfectly overlap into each other. So I'm not going to show the whole process of me doing this because it does take a long time to do, but I'm going to show you how to get started. So you're just going to do lines from the top of the head all the way to the bottom, all the way to the end of the body. Okay, when you're done with the fish scales, give yourself a pat on the back because that was a lot of work. And we're gonna move on to the fins. This part's a bit easier. We're just gonna take our brush, that same small brush, that same red color, and we're going to make lines that go from the top of the head to the top of the fin. So these are slightly curved lines, and we're gonna bring them up. Take your time on these, no need to rush. The slower you go, the easier it is to have control over your lines and make them nice and straight and smooth. And as you can see, they start to get smaller as we reach the end of the fin. So they're getting slightly smaller each time I make a line. We're going to continue making lines until we reach the very end of the fin. Then we're going to repeat that process with the fins down here on the bottom. We're drawing a curved line that starts at the bottom of the body and then goes out. We can kind of use the shape of the fin as a guideline to help us draw our lines. So we have that first one that's closer to us, and then we're going to have that one that's kind of tucked behind. Now the tail's a little bit different. We're gonna start by making this line, and it's gonna curve all the way to the end. We're gonna work on this back tail fin. And it's okay if you can't make the line in one big stroke. You can load up your paintbrush with paint and water, but it's really tricky to make these lines look really good when they're so long. So it is perfectly fine if you have to stop in the middle of your brush stroke, load up your paintbrush and keep going. That is perfectly okay. So we're just gonna work on that back tail fin, the one that's behind the one in the front. That's probably the easiest one. And let's go ahead and start in the middle. We're going to draw a line that goes right to the middle. And then the next line is going to go more towards the end. We're going to draw these lines slowly making their way over to the end of the tail fin. Slowly making their way over to the end of the tail fin. To make them a little bit more realistic, it's good to add like a little bit of a curve to your line as you're drawing it, that it's not perfectly straight. A little bit of a curve, and then they get straighter as they reach the very top of the tail fin. There's no perfect amount of lines you should have. There's no set rule. It's kind of just determining how you think it looks. So I'm going back and I'm adding a few more lines because it looked a little bit too empty. So that is completely up to you. And then for the other side of the tail, we're going to do the same exact thing. Same exact thing. So when it's near the center, we're just going to draw kind of a straightish line towards the end of the tail. But then as we work our way out, it's going to go closer to the bottom of that tail fin. Towards the bottom of that tail fin. And then don't forget, we have this tiny itty bitty little fin back here. You can choose to include it, or you can decide, nah, I don't want that. Completely up to you. So as you can see, I'm doing this outer edge, which is fairly straight. And then the remaining lines are going to be more curved. I went ahead and repeated the same thing on the other fish, because it is basically the same process. And then I'm going in with my black watercolor. I only added a tiny amount of water because we want it to be very saturated, very dark. And we're going to go ahead and color in the pupil. This is the only part of the painting that's going to be black. I don't really like to use black in my realistic paintings because it kind of dulls it down, kind of makes it look cartoony. So this is the only part of the painting we're going to use black watercolor. Alrighty, once you're done with that black watercolor, we're gonna go in with our white gouache or white acrylic paint, whatever you have. We got that tiny brush, we're gonna put a little bit on top, and we're gonna start making our bubbles. Now, I really like these bubbles. I think they add a lot to this painting. You're basically just gonna take your brush and you're gonna make a circle. Just gonna make a circle. And then once you're happy with your circle, we're gonna add a dot and then a line, and then check it out, looks like a bubble. So I think the key to making these bubbles is to vary up the size of them. So I drew a small one and then I'm drawing a slightly bigger one, and it kind of looks like they're coming out of the fish's mouth, which I think is fun. And we're just gonna do the same thing. You can also put a line on the bottom of the bubble too. It is completely up to you. You can do whatever feels right to you. And I'm gonna add one more on top. We're gonna basically repeat the same thing with the other fish, and we're gonna add some bubbles sporadically throughout the painting. There's not really a method to this, it's more just going on intuition, what feels right to you, where seems like a good spot for your bubbles. So have fun with this part. And then a final touch I like to put on my bubbles are some little sparkles. So it's basically like drawing a cross. And then I put some little dots around it. I think even though it's such a small gesture, such a small thing to do, it really adds a lot of pizzazz to a painting. So we'll just put some dots around wherever feels best, wherever you're like, that area is a little bit plain. You can go ahead and add some dots and some sparkles. Or you may decide, hey, I don't really like the sparkles and dots, which is totally okay too. It's just going with what feels right to you, what feels right for your painting. Then the finishing touch to the painting, and this is honestly my favorite part, it makes the fish look so much more lively, is to add a dot And then a line at the bottom of the pupil. Look at him! Doesn't he look more alive? He does. I'm gonna do that to both of them. And then I decided to go back in when the gouache was all dry and make the rest of the eye yellow. And that's all there is to it. We're done with our painting. Once everything is 100% dry, you can go ahead and very slowly tear off your masking tape. I would try to be really careful because if you do this too quickly, sometimes the paper can rip. I don't want that to happen to your paper, so just take your time, go slowly, and you'll have this really smooth, crisp border once it's all removed. And we're all done. Thanks for following along, guys.